Hello, fellow Sojourners. I'm your host, Dave Layton, and welcome to Travel with a Purpose, a podcast designed to keep Sojourners and friends informed, entertained, and inspired. For today's episode, we'll be visiting with Andy Scott. Now, his wife, Catherine, was kind of bashful. She didn't want to get on the show, but we have Andy here, and that'll have to do. Hello, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Dave. It's good to talk to you again.
Well, I'm excited about this opportunity. I'm wanting to do a series of shows about our heritage, our history, and I can't think of any better way to start than to talk about Paul and Peggy. But before we get to talking about them and sojourning and their vision for it, tell me a little bit about yourselves.
Well, I'm Andy Scott, and my wife is Catherine. She is actually British, and they had immigrated from Britain after living on North American, South American continents, and in Africa, and in all over Britain as well. But he was an engineer. They were members of the church. They immigrated to Australia when she was 14. And just a few months before I went to New Guinea as a missionary, her parents traveled up there and worked there for a number of years. And she came up to visit them, and I met her. We wrote for 2 years, and when she finished her nurse's training, she came up and we were married in 1976.
Okay. All right, 1976, you were married.
Yes, and so Mom and Dad were able to come over for that trip, and that was the only time they visited us on the mission field in Papua New Guinea.
Well, that's a long ways off.
He was amazing. He would go and sit down with people in Australia, and he helped them for several days because he flew Space A, and so they had time in Sydney. But he worked with the churches there, as he does with personal evangelism, and is helping them to be stronger and more mature. And then when he came up to New Guinea, even though he didn't speak the language of the people, he was well connected to them. He would leave our house. We lived in a village, and he'd just leave the house and go wandering through the village and visit with people and getting to know them. And when he left, they gave him a whole lot of gifts of arrows and bows and different things to commemorate his trip there. Wow. But he was well loved by everybody he met.
Well, that's the Paul and Peggy I knew for sure. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit more about the family. You've got a good start on about them, so tell us a little bit more about them.
Well, I'm the third of three brothers, and Paul Robert Scott Jr. passed away earlier this year.
I did not know that. Okay.
He had Alzheimer's, but he was a sojourner after he retired from the Army after 20 years as a major. And so he kind of took over some of the traveling that Mom and Dad were supposed to do when their health made it so they couldn't travel as much anymore. But our middle brother is Tom, and he helped take care of them a lot. He drove to Lackland Terrace a lot of times to help them in their trailers and repairing and cleaning and helping them their standard of living. And it was very helpful for him to do that for them too. But my father was converted a year before I was born, and by a guy named Andy Belknap. And so they named me for him. Okay. But he was an elder in San Diego after he had retired from the Navy. He served in the Navy. When he was in high school, he joined up during the war, and he was in North Africa leading some prisoners of war that were Germans into the town on the African continent. And they were walking down the road and everything, and he was being shelled by Rommel. And he realized, that's the day that that his high school class was graduating. And so, he and three other guys on the football team had joined up to the Navy during their senior year. Okay. But they were allowed to graduate anyway. But it just shows the kind of person he was. He loved his country, but he loved the Lord too. He was just a very good man of integrity. And so in the Navy, we lived in Hawaii, and we lived in Washington, and mostly in San Diego. I was born there, and that's where we lived when he retired. So he was an elder of the church there. When he retired, he started a carpet cleaning business, and that worked into the carpets would shrink away from the walls. So he bought stretchers and stuff to put them back. A friend of ours had a furniture store and said, "Can you lay carpet?" So he went to the library and checked out a book to how to lay carpet, and he started laying carpet as well. And then we had a member of the church that had an office and said, "You do all this cleaning stuff. Can you come in and clean my office?" And it turned out that she was the secretary for a medical center. And the doctors came in and asked her, "Who cleaned your office?" And that went to a full-blown business of janitorial service in several buildings in San Diego. And he never asked for a single job.
Okay.
Everyone came to him and asked him to do it. And that was
his work spoke for him.
His work ethic, the way he did it carefully, the way he did it thoroughly. Yeah. And I enjoyed working with him in that. He taught me a lot in my life skills as well in doing that. Sewing carpets, cleaning carpets, moving pianos, or just laying the carpets and everything else. So he was a hard worker. But in '69, he decided to go from San Diego to Lubbock, Texas to attend Sunset School of Preaching. And he started, and 2 years later completed that program. And when he finished in '71, I started. Okay. And my eldest brother, Paul, was actually halfway through that same school program. But what, our family I just admire my parents so much. Yeah. My mother was a Sunday school teacher extraordinaire. She wrote a book on the facts of Acts and helped people with studying the book of Acts and being able to key the facts to each chapter with the letter of the alphabet, A for chapter 1, B for chapter 2, etc.
Okay.
And when I went through that program, it really formed my life and helped me to make that commitment to be a missionary, which I did when I graduated from Sunset in '73. And went through the missions program, which is an extra 6 months of study. In November of '73, I was in New Guinea as 2 months into my 21st year, and worked there. We worked there a total of 30 years on the mission field. So a lot of the time that Mom and Dad were in Sojourners and developing it in the early days, I was overseas. But
before when we chatted the other day, I mentioned to you that I had the honor of meeting Paul and Peggy in the early '80s when I was a young staff sergeant in the Air Force, and I was stationed there at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio and worshiped at the Lackland Terrace Church. And so Paul and Peggy came to spend the summer. He was getting some health care there at Wilford Hall Medical Center. And so we got to know him, and he really was an inspirational man. I had never heard of sojourning or Sojourners, and so it was fascinating to meet him and to hear about Sojourners. And he encouraged me. He said, "When you retire, you need to think about being a sojourner." And so when I finally did retire, not just from the military, but from the workforce, we began sojourning. So I owe that to their initial inspiration about that. But
that's kind of how the whole Sojourners, that's how it started and how it grew. Yeah. When he finished his studies at Sunset, the church in Opaico, Texas, sent them up to Sheridan, Wyoming for 2 years. And that was his first sojourn. And he and Mom were up there, and their mission that was to help the congregation there become self-supporting and hire their own preacher and support him fully. And they were able to accomplish that with Jen Seagraves that was hired there and replaced him 2 years after they went. And so that then also was needed in South Carolina and the church in Conroe, Texas, asked him to go down there and do the same thing. So he went down there to the church in Anderson, South Carolina for another couple of years and did that as well. And so that brought them to the mid-70s. And at sunset, we'd always go out on campaigns during the break weeks and things. And so we'd go in, we'd knock doors, and then we'd leave a week later. And his idea was, wouldn't it be nice to be able to go in, be self-contained, not creating any dependency on the congregation at all, but to be able to go in with your own RV or whatever and be able to stay there for 6 weeks and not just help with the campaign, but help with the follow-up and help with training the congregation, and that the congregations needed help with training Bible class teachers. Okay. They went to South Carolina, supported by the church in Conroe, Texas. And when they completed their sojourn there for 2 years, and the church there was independent, supporting themselves, self-supporting, the church in Conroe, and he talked about the Sojourners. And so they started the sojourning program, and he and Mom would travel, and some friends of ours like Marvin and Linda Hall from San Diego. He was one of the elders from out there, and people I grew up knowing, and several others, a small pod of them, would go different places together, and they started traveling together to do these things. And it just grew from there, trying to go into different congregations for different amounts of time for different purposes, always requested by the churches to come. They didn't recruit to go. They just, that people knew they were available and what some of the things they could help with. So that's what they did. And his emphasis at first especially was very much on the spiritual side of the training, the maturing of congregations all over the country that had small groups or small churches and just struggling in different ways. And they'd go in and help them in however they could for the time that they had with them. And so it just continued to grow. And one of the challenges they had was trying to coordinate people that were willing to go with the places that they needed to go to. And so they started these area meetings where, like down in Weslaco, Texas, where the snowbirds would come south and they would be there and have a training session and lay out the plan for the year. And they can do that. And I believe that at one time I heard there was 7 of those meetings around the country at different places, up north and over in the east and down in the south and different places. So they traveled everywhere. When we lived overseas, we didn't know even what state they were in. I'd have to call my aunt to maybe find out where they were, so I knew how to contact them if I needed to.
Because they were on the road.
They were on the road, and they were from everywhere. But his purpose was to help the churches spiritually. And in so doing, one of the goals he shared with me was that if the churches could be self-supporting and independent and mature spiritually and have strength, that would free up a lot of the funds from the South to be able to do more mission work in other places. But rather than just having some congregations being dependent on other congregations for their support, their existence. And so he wanted to help them to be strong and be multiplying rather than just being dependent on others. And that was one of his main purposes in doing that, using his talents, his training, his abilities. He was able to set up personal work classes with people, just sit across the table from them and teach them about Jesus. And he developed a confidence and salvation Bible study that he taught to all the sojourners, especially at first. And when they went out, they were able to hold studies as well. I remember one lady that he met in the hospital when he was in San Antonio at Lackland. And he had a Bible study with her after he got out, and they went through the confidence and salvation. And 2 weeks later, she went through the same study with some of her friends, and they too were converted as well. So it was a kind of something that was not just what he could do, but what he could do to help people do.
Yeah.
And training and mentoring and helping
Okay.
people wherever he was. And that's just the kind of person he was.
You've given me a lot of great information about them, what led them to starting and their vision. So you've summarized all of that very well. But let me ask you, it was not always easy. I know that. What were some of the challenges? You mentioned one of them was being able to coordinate everybody, but what were some of the challenges that they overcame?
Well, like I mentioned, I was overseas for a lot of the time in the development of the Sojourners. And so he didn't share a lot with me. He didn't want me to worry about everything or whatever worries they had. But I know that the worries he had, he would go to the Lord. He was a man that would have a cup of coffee with the Lord every morning.
Okay, I like that.
They would talk about things together. And then he just was a man of wisdom, but he wasn't afraid to seek advice from others and the counsel of others and working with them. He never set himself above anybody else. He was always a brother and working together in the same direction. And so the Sojourners all were such a quality of people. Not only were they retired, but they were mature as Christians. They were mature in age. They had a lot of experience in the church. And that experience, they were able to work through and find solutions to whatever difficulties there were. And they were willing to take responsibility on. In order to get more Sojourners, there was a lot of times that they set up booths at the different university lectureships and places that people would be and sharing the mission with them. And just like his businesses grew through word of mouth. And by the way, he sold that janitorial business, and that's what helped him to be able to afford to go to Sunset.
Well,
but
Sojourners are still doing the promotionals, but a lot of it's word of mouth and
exactly, and that's how his businesses grew. And that was the quality of people that were attracted, were people that wanted to serve the Lord. They wanted to travel, and that's a wonderful thing, but travel with a purpose is awesome. And where you can help people as you go. It was a good fit for a lot of people.
Well, it is, and we're still getting quality people that I just stand back sometime and it almost takes my breath away. I remember the first workshop that we went to, my wife and I were sitting towards the back of the auditorium, and I remember looking out over there thinking, what is happening at the congregation where these people are from? Because what amazing workers and talent that was in that room with those folks. And it was just amazing for me to see that. I know something about Paul. I remember very well was he was continuously recruiting. He wanted more of us to become involved with sojourning. And I mentioned to you in our previous conversation that one of our elders at Lackland Terrace resigned from the eldership and became a full-time sojourner, Daryl Flint.
Yes.
So, but
that was the same way he was with people. He came to New Guinea. He visited with the manager in the hardware store and set up a Bible study with him, and just right there. And I'd been talking to the guy for years, and Dad just came in and was able just to break through and just talk to him and asking questions. And he was engaged with people. And that was where his strong point was, his connection with the Lord and connecting to the people and being able to bring those together. And the Sojourners were a group of leaders and amazing people, and still are.
Yeah, workers, very much so. I tell people when I teach classes about being active in the church and what they can do, I teach teachers, things like that. I always like to take them to Exodus, where God commissioned Moses to go to Egypt and free his people. And finally, after Moses was putting out those objections, the Lord said, "What's in your hand?" And as we would say here in Alabama, I got this stick in my hand. He had his staff in his hand. And that's kind of the idea I have of Paul. He used what he had, whatever it was, to the glory of God, for the Lord's service. And
Absolutely.
Sojourners was the perfect vehicle for him to use to do that. And so we try to encourage our sojourners and those who are thinking about being a sojourner is use what you have. You have talents, you have knowledge, experience, all of that. We're using it for the Lord.
Absolutely. And I noticed over the years that quite a few were doing things like painting or rebuilding or doing construction
Sure.
things and helping, and that's wonderful. But originally, his purpose was to help the church mature and grow spiritually and be trained as so that those congregations could continue to thrive and multiply. And
Well, we
that
do a lot of
multiplication factor was there. So
Yeah, we do a lot of physical work, but we tell everybody everything is a spiritual sojourn. You know, you need to be encouraging, you need to be teaching and leading and looking for opportunities while you're on that sojourn. We have uh, blended those fairly well together, but we need to keep reminding everybody that our roots are spiritual. We are about taking the gospel.
that's right.
Yeah.
And helping congregations to help themselves,
Yeah.
but helping them to reach out and have the heart to reach out,
Yeah.
not to be afraid to reach out, and to know how to reach out. It's a lot of
And of
times
course,
if you know what to say, you're not near as afraid to say it than if you
that's right. Yes.
wonder, what do I say?
And we do have classes during workshop to help folks learn how to do that, to give them the confidence, the knowledge. But you know, even when we go to places like North Alabama Christian Children's Home or Rainbow Omega, we have a new one this year, a new sojourn we're going to be doing at the Home of Recovery and Restoration. That men that have been released from prison, they were in prison because of drug abuse, substance abuse. Um, they are immersed in the gospel while they are in this program for about 6 months, and many of them are converted to Christ. And so we're going to be helping out with there, but we're already laying the groundwork to not just go there and help them with things around the building, but to teach and to be a part of that encouragement. That's the heritage of sojourning that Paul and Peggy brought to us and still
That's
do inspire us to do
excellent.
that.
That's excellent. And I guess the philosophy of the Sojourners guided a lot of my work too, because we'd started and worked with over 40 congregations in the first area we worked, and then was always going out and working with multiple congregations, even in New Guinea and in Scotland when we lived there for 3 years. My wife is an only child, and her mother had cancer, and we went there to take care of her during her time. But we worked with several congregations and trying to be an encouragement as we could. So there's an international branch of the Sojourners as well.
Yeah.
Influenced by my dad.
We have had a trip or two, not myself, but some of the sojourners up to Canada. But
Yes.
that kind of shut down a little bit during the COVID years, but we're hoping it'll kick back up again. All right. Well, Andy, do you have anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
How many more hours do we have?
I know. I'll tell you what, I reserve the right to bring you back on again and talk a little bit more in the future, because like I said, I do want to have some future episodes to talk more about our heritage, because it's just such a rich history. Maybe we can talk about some of the people that you knew that were sojourners.
Well, one of the things that touched me last year was July 16th was my father's 100th birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, so he was around a while, and I keep seeing him as I knew him, but, he was somebody that loved the Lord, and he just served him with his life and his his integrity and his whole strength.
Yeah.
And he worked. He was faithful unto death.
Well, he truly was a faithful servant of our Lord, an inspiration to a lot of us. We have his picture in a few different places around Camp B, and we want people to know who he was, who he and Peggy together were, and their vision.
Yes.
Okay.
I have their picture hanging up in our bedroom so I can remember
Good
who they
deal.
were too. They're special people.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate everybody that has caught the sojourning vision,
Yeah.
and is willing to surrender themselves and travel with God to touch
Well,
people's lives.
we're gonna have a wonderful year this year, and 2025 is going to be a great year for sojourning. We've got a wonderful group of new sojourners that we're
That's
just very
awesome.
excited about. So, okay. Well, let me wrap up, my friend.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
this opportunity.
Well, friends, that wraps up our visit with Andy. I appreciate their time as they help us remember an important part about our history. If you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, or you know someone that we should have as a guest, or if there's a topic you wish for us to discuss, please email me at sojournersevangelize@gmail.com. That's sojournersevangelize@gmail.com. Also, please follow our podcast and keep up to date when new episodes are published. Well, I'm your host, Dave Layton, and remember, we glorify God as together we travel with a purpose.